Hey there, fellow adventurers! Today we're diving into a story that's a wild ride of science fiction, conspiracy theories, and maybe even a touch of truth. It's the tale of the Philadelphia experiment, a supposed top-secret military operation that aimed to make a warship invisible. Sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But for decades, this story has captivated and confused people in equal measure. The story goes that in 1943, smack dab in the middle of World War II, the US Navy was experimenting with some seriously advanced technology. Their goal, to make the USS Eldridge, a destroyer escort ship, invisible to enemy radar. Now, while the idea of a stealth ship is intriguing enough, the story takes a turn for the truly bizarre. Legend has it that the experiment went haywire. Instead of just disappearing from radar, the Eldridge vanished into thin air, only to reappear miles away in Norfolk, Virginia. And if that wasn't mind-boggling enough, some accounts claim the ship returned with crew members fused to the metal, driven mad, or even vanished altogether. Wild, right? But as with any good mystery, we're here to dig deeper, separate fact from fiction, and see if there's any truth to this incredible tale. So buckle up, because we're about to journey into the heart of the Philadelphia experiment. Every good mystery needs a starting point, a breadcrumb trail leading us down the rabbit hole. For the Philadelphia experiment, that trail begins with a man named Carl M. Allen. In the early 1950s, Allen, who often went by the alias Carlos Allende, sent a series of bizarre letters to a UFO researcher named Morris K. Jessup. These weren't your average fan mail, though. Allen claimed to have witnessed the Philadelphia experiment firsthand. He described the USS Eldridge disappearing in a blinding flash of green light and reappearing with horrific consequences for its crew. He even went into detail about the scientific principles behind the experiment, mentioning things like unified field theory and manipulating electromagnetism. Now, Allen's letters were light on hard evidence. They were full of cryptic messages, rambling accounts, and shifting details that made his story hard to pin down. Some people dismissed him as a hoaxer or someone struggling with mental illness, but there was something about the sheer conviction in Allen's words, the disturbing details he described, that stuck with Jessup. He couldn't shake the feeling that there might be something more to this crazy story, and so the seeds of the Philadelphia experiment legend were sown. Allen's letters, as outlandish as they seemed, planted the idea in the public imagination, and it wasn't long before the story took on a life of its own. As whispers of the Philadelphia experiment spread, so too did the details of that fateful night in 1943. The story, fueled by word of mouth and speculation, became more and more fantastical. The most common version of the tale places the USS Eldridge docked at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The Navy, according to the legend, had rigged the ship with a complex system of generators and coils designed to manipulate the electromagnetic field around the vessel. The goal was to bend light and radio waves, rendering the Eldridge invisible to enemy radar. The experiment commenced, and witnesses described a strange green fog enveloping the ship. The air crackled with energy, and then, in a blinding flash, the Eldridge vanished. Some accounts claimed the ship reappeared momentarily in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away, before returning to Philadelphia just as quickly. It was as if the Eldridge had teleported, only to be yanked back to its point of origin. But the cost of this alleged teleportation was high. The stories described the crewmen in horrific states, some fused to the ship's metal bulkheads, others driven mad, and some simply vanished, never to be seen again. As the Philadelphia experiment story gained traction, it naturally drew scrutiny from scientists and researchers. The claims were extraordinary, defying the laws of physics as we understand them. So could there be any truth to the tale? The science behind the Philadelphia experiment is often rooted in the unified field theory, a concept explored by Albert Einstein. This theory attempts to unify all the fundamental forces of nature into a single framework. Some proponents of the Philadelphia experiment suggest that by manipulating electromagnetic fields, the Navy may have stumbled upon a way to interact with this unified field, leading to unintended and bizarre consequences. However, the scientific community remains skeptical. Critics point out that the energy levels required to manipulate space-time in the way described would be astronomical, far beyond anything achievable with the technology available in 1943 or even today. Furthermore, the idea of teleportation, as depicted in the Philadelphia experiment, violates fundamental principles of physics. To teleport an object, you would need to instantly disassemble its matter in one location and reassemble it perfectly in another. This process would require an unimaginable amount of energy and precision, and even then, there's no guarantee the reassembled object would retain its original structure, let alone the consciousness of a living crew. While the science fiction appeal of the Philadelphia experiment is undeniable, the scientific community largely dismisses it as a fictional tale with no basis in reality. Faced with mounting public interest and speculation, the US Navy has consistently denied any involvement in the Philadelphia experiment. They maintain that the events described never happened and that the story is a fabrication with no basis in reality. The Navy points to several inconsistencies and impossibilities within the story. Firstly, the USS Eldridge was never stationed in Philadelphia during the time the experiment allegedly took place. Ship logs and records place the Eldridge in New York, and then on convoy duty in the Bahamas during the fall of 1943, making its alleged presence in Philadelphia impossible. Secondly, the Navy explains that while they did experiment with a process called degaussing during World War II, this procedure was a far cry from making ships invisible. Degaussing involved running electrical cables around a ship's hull to create a magnetic field that would counteract the ship's own magnetic signature. This made the vessels harder to detect by magnetic mines, but did not make them invisible to the naked eye or radar. Despite the Navy's repeated denials and explanations, the legend of the Philadelphia experiment persists. Some believe the Navy is covering up the truth, while others see it as an example of how easily misinformation can spread and take root in the public consciousness.